in Montana, roughly 64% of people agree that climate change is going to adversely affect future generations. And about 68% of Montanans talk about climate rarely or never. So there's almost the same number of people who are worried it's going to impact future generations, also don't talk about it. Doesn't mean it's the same people, right? But it's pretty astonishing to me that those percentages are so close. You would think if 64% of people were really worried about the future for our kids, that we'd be having a lot of conversation about how do we tackle this huge problem. But because of political divisions and polarization and probably just frankly overwhelm and despair about what to do, there are a lot of reasons we don't have those conversations.
Hello and welcome to Power to the Parents. I am your host, Eileen Ariaza, and today I have with me Winona Bateman. She is the founder and executive director of Families for a Livable Climate, an amazing group that galvanizes families to fight against climate change in Montana. Hi, Winona. Welcome to the pod.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I was so excited to learn about your show and get the invitation. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. All right, let's dive in. So I wanted to start by asking you something because I've heard that you identify as an introvert. But at the same time, you're very vocal about climate change and taking climate action. So can you tell me about what inspires you to be so vocal about this issue, being someone who's not really always willing to put yourself out there like that?
Yeah, it makes me think of the signs that I've seen at climate protests around the world. And I've seen one sign over and over again that says, "It's so bad, even the introverts are here." Which I think pretty much sums it up. But my own personal engagement came in 2018 when the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change issued their 1.5 degree report, which basically said we need to keep global warming to 1.5 degrees globally in order to minimize the impacts to our communities and families. And that report reading about that report was really sobering for me. I had always been engaged in different issues, but I wouldn't say I was like an activist at that point in my life. And the report was intense enough that when I thought of my 4-year-old at the time and her future, I was really worried and upset and scared. And it kind of moved me out of my introverted place of like, okay, I have some flexibility in my life, which is a huge privilege, and I need to use that for something for my kids' future and for the world that I love. I mean, we live on a beautiful planet. There's so much to be grateful for and so much to enjoy, and so that's what moved me out of it.
Yeah, it's for so many of us as parents, it's our kids that really push us to get vocal, to get activated, to do things differently. And with climate change, I feel like for some of us, or for a lot of parents, I've heard that there is this level of anxiety that we feel. It's this idea of like, what is the future going to look like for my kid? I have no idea. And sometimes that's paralyzing. So I'm curious if you ever felt anything like that and what helped you move from that paralysis that we sometimes feel because it's such an overwhelming problem to action.
Right, 100%. And that is such a normal human response to something that's so big and something that none of us can solve on our own, right? So if our kid was, in the road and a car was coming and we knew we had to go move them to keep them safe, we could do that. We could be the hero. But with climate change, it's not like that. It is this thing that's kind of bearing down on their futures, and that we need our generations as adults to act now so that our kids can have a good future. but we can't do it alone. We have to do it in community, and we have to do it on a massive scale. So obviously one person, it's really hard to have that much power. So I think what I found was that I was worried, angry, wanting to do something. And what seemed to work is to get together with other people and talk about it and share our fears and our hopes and say, well, if things are hard and it's a big challenge, let's be in this together as a community, and let's work together to do our part, a very small part, to make the future better for our kids. And I always use the image of a tapestry. In the fight for a livable and thriving future for our kids, there are going to be very few heroes. Definitely some heroes, but very few. But what we can be as a community is we can all be weaving kind of this tapestry of change. We can grab our thread and we can start running. We can hold hands with our neighbors, and we can just start weaving in and out and doing our part. And if we're all doing that, we're going to create this big, beautiful new world, right? And that's why community for me has become like the motivating and kind of cohesive inspiration. And that's why our mission as an organization is we create community for climate action in Montana. And sometimes that feels nebulous, but most days when I reflect on our work and how we bring people together to act, it feels really concrete and really speaks to the world we want to live in the future.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it totally. And that community that you're building, so much of it is about storytelling and telling stories and sharing experiences. So I'd love to hear about how you use stories in your work. And I know I think we have a story that we want to play, but I want to hear a little bit about how the role that stories play in the work that you do.
Yeah, I would say they play the role of bringing us together and keeping us together and awakening us to our power and potential in this world we're living in right now. And so we use story to help people articulate why they care, why they want to take action. We use story to help people figure out what kinds of actions feel good for them as a human, because that's really variable and there's really no right answer to action. There's literally millions of things any of us can be doing to help solve this problem. So there's a lot of options. And so we use stories to engage parents and caregivers who come to us and say, I am really scared and I want to get involved and I don't know where to start. And we use story to help them try to talk about their story, tell their story, so they can kind of navigate what their pathway is going to look like. And then we use story. We've been using our Montana Climate Story Project in a couple different ways. One, to just catalog what's happening across our state in a way that's just about someone saying, I used to fish on this river all summer, and I took my kids there, and now I want to take my grandkids there. And except the rivers closed down for half the summer because of water temperature, because of what we call hoot owl restrictions on the river. And, story is a way that we can talk to each other and share experiences without political division, without, it's, one of our oldest forms of communication as humans. And it's like how we get to know each other, how we create culture, how we invent things, right? Story is so central. So on one level, we're just collecting what's happening and trying to paint a cohesive picture or a big picture of every corner of our state. On the other hand, we're trying to reawaken a tool in our communities that can help us have conversations, and instead of getting into political talking points that divide us, talk about our shared fears, our shared hopes, our deep love of our beautiful state and our planet, and like all the things we have to be grateful for and that are part of our family's cultures, right? So it's serving a lot of different purposes, I would say.
Yeah. Well, why don't we listen to one of those stories now?
Hello, welcome everyone. Well, hopefully I don't talk too long. I could probably talk all night. So this is my 25th season farming. So this is my 25th September 7th in the Bitter Valley growing food, which is really exciting. And I feel like I've seen so much over the years. So I've spent a lot of time being outside, under the big sky, with my hands in the soil. And just in case you didn't know, it is soil, it's not dirt, it's soil. So I want to start with a little farmer's trick. So in the fall, when you have these amazing, beautiful tomato plants and you've been working on them all summer long and they have these beautiful green tomatoes on them, what do? Well, the trick is you go about a foot out from the base of your tomato plant and you cut with a shovel about halfway around the tomato plant, and that just gives the tomato enough stress that it's going to ripen all of your tomatoes pretty quickly. So that's the trick for when you're in the fall and you have those green tomatoes, what are you going to do? So I want you to remember that one. So really what the story in that is, with nature, stress equals abundance. So the plants just really want to succeed and reproduce, so that's what they do. So I want to tell you one of the saddest things I saw this year. So I was driving through the big hole at the beginning of June, and it was so rainy and so wet that my husband and I both were like, this is going to be the biggest mosquito year ever. Like, this is going to be amazing in the big hole. Sorry for the fishermen stuck with mosquitoes. And then I drove up to Havre to visit my parents by train. So driving from Hamilton to Havre, it rained the entire way. So same idea, green everywhere, standing water. There's going to be a cajillion mosquitoes and bugs, and this is going to be the most amazing farming season ever, driving to Havre in the middle of June. Well, I drove back on the 1st of July. From Havre to Great Falls, which is 91 miles, I hit 2 bugs. 2 bugs with my car, which was heartbreaking. And then I noticed, on the right side of the car, all the wheat is like exactly the same height and perfect. And on the left, there's 0 growth. Nothing is growing. Just black dirt at that point, inert dirt. And so what must have happened was a practice called chem-fallow, where modern agriculture uses often glyphosate to spray all over the field to kill everything. In the idea of using no-till and conserving water, they just kill everything. So it's a fallow year, but they're using chemicals. So to me, that was my saddest, maybe ever discovery about Montana, was hitting 2 bugs in 91 miles after the biggest, rainiest spring I've ever seen. So important to notice, I think. But then, my happiest moment. I feel like in 25 years, this has been the most abundant summer ever. If you remember back to the spring, the flowers were just crazy. The blooms on all the trees. I don't think I've ever seen so many blossoms on the trees. So many. The pear trees, just blossoms everywhere. There was no frost when they were blooming. The linden trees, I don't know if you noticed the linden trees in town. I've never ever seen so many flowers on the linden trees. Just magnificent. It was like nature was singing this amazing chorus of everything was blooming and blossoming. And then as the season progressed, now all those blossoms turned into pears and choke cherries and every kind of fruit you could imagine in the Bitterroot. So abundant, including the weeds, especially on my farm. Lots and lots of weeds, but I've never seen the weeds be so happy and so happy. And so many amazing flower heads on everything, on the weeds, on everything we want to grow. So amazing. And then remember how warm it was in the spring? So the soil was really warm. These are the biggest potatoes we've ever had. This was the first year the potatoes sprouted in less than a week. Never happened in 25 years. And the potatoes are early, so early this year. Everything has been fast and dense. It's the biggest, most prolific crops of many things on my farm, and I feel like when you look around town, it's just been such a prolific summer. It's amazing. We've seen toads and baby snakes and caterpillars and moths. Have you noticed how many butterflies there were in the Bitterroot this summer? Butterflies galore. And just walking now in my field, I see so many caterpillars that when I pass them, like, okay, go find your home and snuggle in for the winter because next year you can come back as a beautiful butterfly. So it has just been so abundant everywhere. Everything's ripening in their seeds. We saw 29 different species of birds on our farm within the last 3 weeks. Like, amazing how much abundance there is right now. Nature is truly, truly bursting forth. Nature's in it, so this is, I think, the crux of the story. Nature's in it 100% right now. So then back to my little farmer's trick idea. So that abundance is amazing, but maybe it's so abundant because of something we've done. Maybe it's like the tomato plant that we stressed it, and so that tomato is doing everything it can to ripen its tomatoes. So nature is doing everything it can to try every way to be successful, every way to reproduce, every way to find abundance and beauty and harmony right now, and all the love that nature has to offer us. So it's sad that it's so abundant, but it's also amazing. And I hope that we could take this story of abundance that nature has right now and make this our new climate story of let's be all in, just like nature is all in right now. Let's be 100%, let's try everything we can in every way to be just like nature and be abundant and overgrowing and bursting forth. It's the biggest, best year ever because nature wants to survive. And so do we. So also in that is being aware that nature's working so hard right now. And we're causing a lot of stress for nature. This modern industrial farming practices that we have, they're really pushing nature to the brink. And there's lots of things that I think you could point out that are causing climate change, but to me, our industrial agriculture system is enemy number one to planet Earth. And everything we do, everything we eat, every purchase we make, we're able to affect that and change that. Everything we grow, we can actually change agriculture. We might not be able to dismantle the CIA, but we can certainly change agriculture in America. Bite by bite, swallow by swallow, we can change this. And we can be inspired by the abundance of nature to try every way. So looking at that, what would our new climate story look like? I'm sorry, I have some notes because I had so many things I wanted to say. So if we're really full of all these possibilities and we're 100% in, what does that mean? To me, that means everyone grows food, even if it's one plant. Everyone grows food, and also everyone eats, and everyone eats healthy food. So looking past all these things that might divide us to the place where we're all growing food, we're all eating food, we're all sharing food. And really the idea of doing the beautiful. So Rumi says, let the beauty you love be what you do. So let the beauty you love be what you do. Let's be that, let's do that. So I think it's like trying everything we can, just like nature is. So let's plant it, let's water it, let's cook it and eat it and share it, save the seeds. Let's plant all the food we can in Ravalli County. Let's dream up ways to steward and harvest and prepare and serve local food to each other and to share the abundance. What will that look like? Could it be kids cooking for senior citizens? Could it be classrooms of schools going to farms? Could it be the front of the high school just being a giant farm instead of grass? Could it be schoolyards turned into gardens? Could it be more community dinners? Could it be picnics? Could it be all ages involved? Again, from seed to swallow. So showing up as this expression of abundance that nature is showing us right now, I think is really inspiring and really important. And it's something each of us can do moment by moment, is showing up again and again. That's the gift of the moment, is there's always another now. And so if you maybe trip and fail on what you were hoping to do, there's the next moment when you can do it the way you really want to do it. You can show up as that person that is the abundance in the world in every next moment, which is really exciting. And that is a lesson from nature. So, sorry. That's what I would love for us to have as our new story of climate in the Bitterroot Valley, is about how nature inspired us to be 100% in for each other and for ourselves and for this valley and for all the birds and the toads and everything that's alive. Let's be 100% in, all of us. Who is willing to be 100% in? Thank you. So then I just want to throw out my little ideas of, you can use sunflowers to create shade for your plants. You can use hog panels to make nice trellises, and if you do them correctly, those will create shade for you. You can plant garlic now. You can save seeds. You can get a tomato at the farmer's market this weekend and save the seeds from that tomato. Even if you're not ever going to plant it, the idea of saving seeds connects you again with all the way back generations to your great-great-great-great-grandmothers, all the way to your great-great-great-great-grandchildren. And the most important moment in the seed is now, because if you don't save that seed, there won't be that seed for the future. So you have that chance again every moment with saving seeds. So I hope everyone this week will go get a tomato and save the seeds from it. It's the easiest thing to do. Think about Johnny Appleseed. He tried and tried and tried and planted apple trees all over the place. He did a bunch of weird stuff too. However, he did plant apple trees everywhere because you have to just keep trying. Think about identifying your growing spaces now. Where are you going to plant food next spring? It doesn't have to be a garden. It doesn't have to be perfect and square and beautiful. It just has to be something you give to the earth that is going to give back to you. We can start a community composting in this town, in this valley. We could have a huge community composting effort. We can ask all of the bakers in Montana to start using organic wheat. Wheat is one of the worst things right now for the environment because of all the chemicals that are sprayed on wheat. So let's ask everyone who's making our bread to please start using organic flour. It's simple. We can eat only meat that's raised in the Bitterroot Valley. We can eat less, but better. And we can prioritize our food purchasing. You could take a bunch of willow cuttings and then plant them all over your yard or all over town. It's super easy. Willows grow with practically no assistance. We could plant fruit trees all over town, all the street trees that we need to replace. What if they were pear and apple trees? You can use simple things like row cover, floating row cover that protects your plants from insects. You can grow your own sprouts. Next year when you get a broccoli plant, you can let that one plant go to seed and really enjoy it and appreciate it. And when you get all the seeds off that broccoli plant, you can grow those seeds as your sprouts in the winter. It's really easy to be deeply ingrained in agriculture and food, just one moment at a time, and again, getting that inspiration from nature. There's so many other kinds of things we can try. The one I really want to suggest that I think we should plan for next year is we need to have a guerrilla farming project in the valley. I think we need to go out and plant food plants all over our community, which we absolutely could do. So that's what I wanted to share with you. Is I'm sad and I'm so thrilled about the abundance of nature and the opportunity again and again, moment by moment, to do what you love. And if beauty is what you love and food is what you love, let's do that together. So thank you so much.
Yeah, that was really powerful and inspiring. And Winona, I know that these stories are a way to counteract something that I've heard you refer to as climate silence. Can you tell me a little bit about that phenomenon?
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit about that, for sure. So climate silence has been well documented, and I would say that the organization that has that I've read the most, read their kind of research about it, is the Yale Climate Communications Program. And essentially, I'll use the example of Montana. In Montana, roughly 64% of people agree that climate change is going to adversely affect future generations. And about 68% of Montanans talk about climate rarely or never. So there's almost the same number of people who are worried it's going to impact future generations, also don't talk about it. Doesn't mean it's the same people, right? But it's pretty astonishing to me that those percentages are so close. You would think if 64% of people were really worried about the future for our kids, that we'd be having a lot of conversation about how do we tackle this huge problem. But because of political divisions and polarization and probably just frankly overwhelm and despair about what to do, there are a lot of reasons we don't have those conversations. So stories are a way to start a conversation with someone. You know, you're with a friend, you're with a family member, and they say, oh, I'm a little worried about our snowpack here in Montana. It's a record low for us. What is that going to mean in July and August when temperatures are 90 to 100 degrees for like 3 or 4 weeks? What's that going to mean? And I might say, well, yeah, I'm worried too. And I just remember 2021 when we had smoke for 6 or 8 weeks in the Missoula Valley. And it was also during COVID, and I couldn't invite friends over to play in our house, and I couldn't go meet friends at the park and take my kid outside and have her engage with her friends because the smoke was too bad. And it was maddening. It was just like, certainly we've always had wildfires in the West, but like, I'm really worried about that. So that could be an example of where I could like connect that story to that experience. And, you know, people of all political persuasions make those kind of comments. You know, we're all seeing what's happening. And if you can bring your own concern and one of your stories in, it's a way to then open the door and have a conversation. We always say when we're ever starting a conversation with anyone in our work, we're like, our only goal is to connect emotionally through a story of some kind, like our own story, show our vulnerability, and then make sure we end the conversation with the goal of having another conversation. So that means we have to take care of how we respond. Right. We have to take care. And I think that's so important. Yeah. So I kind of took a sidetrack, but hopefully that is a good response.
No, that's a great response. And it's about calling people into community, into a rather than calling them out about, you know, what they're doing wrong or how they need to like change their lives in all these ways in order to protect our climate. That's a little bit too harsh, but like having a more slow, organic, real approach is totally, that makes a ton of sense. And then your group is really focused on families. So I'm curious, we are a parenting organization as well. I have 2 boys. Do you talk to your daughter about climate change?
I do. Yeah. I talked to her. I have pictures of the 2 of us at my first protest that I organized, or first, I guess, demonstration, when she was 4. So she's been in it since she was 4. She used to play Climate Strike as a game. Now she's kind of grown out of it. But yeah, we talk about it, and, you know, our conversations are going to start to get, probably more intense here in the next few years. She's 10 now. But, you know, I share like, oh, like we're low on snowpack, and that is because, you know, a contributing factor is our changing climate and our warming temperatures. And so I try to be real and say it's a really big problem, but millions of people are working to solve it. And we have all the solutions we need to actually solve it. We really do. I mean, there's problems we have to solve within those solutions for sure, and we should address them. They're very serious problems. But we have the solutions, and what we need is connection and community to get those solutions implemented. It's like the missing piece. But yes, we talk about it all the time, and you know, I try to just be truthful and focus on solutions and the fact that we can solve it, because we can.
Yeah, that's a great formula for talking to kids about anything complicated. Yeah. And And do you have any advice for parents who don't know how to approach this with their kids? You know, it feels daunting and big, and like sometimes I feel like I need a degree in some sort of science to be able to talk to my kid about it. So how can I approach it, like as a regular mom whose kid might be learning about it in school, or whose kid might be frustrated because they can't go skiing, or because it's really hot, or because there's seaweed in Florida when we go visit our cousins down there? Yeah.
Well, I mean, it certainly depends on the age of the kiddo, but I would say, if you don't have a lot of information as the parent because you're aware of it as a problem and you're worried, but like you haven't been able to kind of look at it, I would say if your kid comes to you and is having questions, or you're ready to start talking about it with them, just getting age appropriate videos to what, like the science of climate change is pretty simple. Like the air is covered, or the earth is covered in the atmosphere, and we're making, it's like, it used to be like a little light blanket, but because we're releasing carbon dioxide through burning fossil fuels, the blanket around the earth is getting thicker. And so it's trapping more of the heat that comes in. It's like a greenhouse works, right? And that's like the basic idea. And there are tons of videos out there that you can watch. You can find one to watch with your child and then just talk about it. Maybe prepping yourself with understanding it, the science of it, and kind of what you want to focus on for your community or like sort of habitat that you live in. Some folks are in a really urban area or along the ocean, and they have different issues than say we have out here in the Intermountain West, right? And they're all being driven by rising temperatures, but what the impacts are a little bit different. So learning about the impacts in your area, and then maybe, is there anyone working on a local solution to build resiliency in the community? If you have a kiddo who's like, I'm really worried and I'd like to do something, because let me tell you, our tagline is action is our hope. And every time I take an action, or especially in community, my hope grows. And that's how we build hope, is by acting. And so I would say that taking action with your kids will probably feel really good and relieve a lot of anxiety, and finding a community of people who care. But starting the conversation, not trying to sugarcoat it, it is serious, and telling them it's not serious and that it's not true.
Right.
So it's really important to be real, because they're going to figure it out. They're going to hear about it, right? It's important to be real. It's also important to not, it's important to focus on solutions, and that if we work together, we can solve it, because that is the truth. And I mean, if we're going to have to spend time thinking about it, I'd rather spend time in that space, right, of like, we're going to work together to address it and build connections and hope and work for a better future. Feels way better than like, I'm going to stay home and make me really sad. Both are human reactions. I don't shame anyone for having those feelings at all, because I've had them. I've had bad days.
Right.
So
no, that's such helpful advice. And you were saying earlier that there are a million solutions and a million things that we can do to combat climate change. And yet at the same time, there is nothing that one of us can do that will solve it. We need to do it in community. So how do we decide what to focus on? And also, I'd love to, so let's start there. How do we decide what to focus on?
I would say pick something you enjoy doing and that brings you joy. I mean, there's so many avenues you could go from. We're going to grow more of our own food, and we're going to try to reduce our waste just on the home level. And those things can feel really good. And if there's something that are already part of your family's culture or family, just how you work, or, maybe it's your neighborhood or whatever wants to do a project or something. I think finding things that bring you joy, but also not just focusing on the home front, but figuring out what in the broader world, in the system, would feel good to do. Like maybe, for example, I have a friend who's a financial advisor, And what he has done is learn about sustainable investing, ESG investing. And he has started educating families. We've done a bunch of like Zoom workshops and also in-person workshops where Montana families have come and essentially just gotten information about how to move their money out of fossil fuel investments. And I think we've to date, like through our workshops, families have divested like $10 million or something, like a pretty big, I mean, it's a drop in the bucket globally, but it's substantial, right?
Yeah.
And he had decided that he wanted to use his field, like what he did for a living, to make a difference. And that feels really good to him and feels really impactful. And I would say it is. So looking around in your life and saying, what am I already doing where I could talk more about climate, I could take action, I could go speak to lawmakers and say, hey, I'm a horticulturalist, right? And I'm seeing the impact on plants and I'm worried, you know, about how we're going to preserve this amazing plant we have in our community. I don't know. That's like a random idea, but I think if you want to take action, it's good to pick something that feels like it makes you want to do it again, I would say. I would also say that it is important to not get too caught up, I think, in do the things at home that feel good and that makes a difference, but we really need systemic change. So how can you do something that brings you joy, that gets you involved with, you know, advocacy for certain laws or changing something on a more systemic level in your community or your state. And also it's really important that you enjoy it, I think, on some level.
Yeah. No, that's totally right. Because that's what's going to keep you going, right?
Yeah.
And that's what's going to make it sustainable for you. But I wanted to ask you about the role that corporations are playing here, right? Because we always talk about like we caused climate change and now we have to solve it. And yes, but corporations are the ones that played the biggest role in destroying our planet. So how does that fit into the work that you do?
We take on corporations. I mean, specifically the energy company in our state, Northwestern Energy, is our largest energy monopoly in the state, monopoly utility in the state. And we have been pressuring them to do better and move in the right direction since we started. Corporations have a huge role to play, and applying pressure to corporations is, I think, a really worthwhile. It gets their attention. Most of them want to be, the folks who run the company want their company and their work to be thought of as a good thing. And shining a spotlight and applying pressure is super important. I mean, I personally hear from families all the time who are like, well, I would get involved, but I feel like a hypocrite because I have to get things in plastic packaging and I have to drive to work and I'm part of the problem. But the missing piece there is like, well, the system is set up that you have to drive to work. Like that's how we built our neighborhoods and our communities. And we need to revisit that. And yes, if there's public transportation and you feel comfortable taking it and that works for you and that's a thing you can do. But if you can't, don't be awash in guilt. Like, right? Because like we needed to change on a much bigger level. Like energy companies could be like, okay, our product is, putting Earth and all of its people into and animals and other families of life, right, into danger. We could change our business model. They knew 40 years ago that we were going to be where we are today. They knew. So they could have changed their business model and they didn't. And that's not our fault, right? Yeah. So I would just say corporations have a huge role to play and they, we want them to be heroes. Come on, corporations. Now's your time. You can be a real hero and not a zero, right? Would love to see that, but we'll, we can hope.
I think that's such an important message. It's a both and. It's, there's tons of things that we can do as families and it's not our fault that we are where we are. and we can hold corporations accountable. We can do things as a family. We can take action. There's a whole menu of things that we can do. And so I wanted to ask you, like, what would you say to someone who's still sitting on the sidelines around climate change, to a family it's one of these people who are just participating in climate silence because they don't know they don't know how to start?
And they're listening and they're curious about where to go. I would say there's no time to start like today. And I would quote Thich Nhat Hanh, and I would say the future is made up of the present moment. And every time you act and do something positive right now, that builds a better world. And our kids need us. And we need you. And we're here for you. And join us. Come into the community.
I love that. Okay, one last question for you, Winona. What gives you hope right now when you think about climate action?
Just our beautiful world and my kiddo. And I'm going to get emotional now. Life gives me hope. Like one of our storytellers at our last event, well, she's been at 2 events, but she talked about like, it's, spring is coming and all the plants they're showing up 150% to grow their fruit and make their pollen and like bring life like in full force. And like we can do that too. Like we can be like those plants and like all the living things that are just bringing their whole selves. We're not going to be perfect, and that's okay. Nature's not perfect and we're part of it. So that gives me hope that we're part of this amazing web of life. And I just want all of our kiddos to live in a thriving, beautiful world that's just and connected. And I'm happy showing up for that every day. So.
That made me want to cry and gave me chills.
Well, yeah. It's the time we're in. We need those big stories.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Me as well. Thank you for having me.